Flying Dinosaurs. Excerpts chosen from many videos. Number 1. Pterodactyl Sightings, Flying Creatures Around the World. We begin with an encounter in Rome, Italy in December of 2019. In the words of one of the eyewitnesses, it had a long tail that fanned out at the tip. It was close to the Colosseum, around 10 p.m. My girlfriend also witnessed this creature. It was about the size of a man. Membrane-type wings. Gliding, not flapping its wings. Went back and forth 3 times. Now for a possible pterosaur sighting in Kenya, Africa. Quote, "Our father took us on a safari. They were driving from Ambulesi to Tsavo National Park, flight of 2 Kongamatos. I kept silent, afraid to be laughed at. The flying creatures were from 24 to 36 feet. I was 14 at the time." Unquote. Here's a reported flying creature in a desert in Spain. Some friends and I drove for a music festival. One night I saw what I at first assumed was an owl. It passed right over us. I realized it was definitely no owl I'd ever seen before. Looked like the same sort of texture as suede, i.e. no feathers. Had a long, thin tail and didn't flap once. The campsite was lit up, illuminating it from beneath. It was 100% not a bird. The impression I got was a lot more bat-like than bird, except it had a beak. Let's look at sighting reports from England. I've received this by email. Quote, "I am a mother of 4 and live in Britain, on the Welsh border, Whitchurch, Shropshire. We live near a wildlife reserve. 2 weeks ago I heard a very strange screech. I could hear it getting closer across the way from behind the trees. Nothing prepared me for what I actually saw. 2 pterodactyls side by side flying past the tree, a giant-sized beak, and the wings had no feathers. Last weekend, 2 of my children were playing in the garden. My son of 13 years came running into me, saying he saw a giant, big brown bird. He did have a look of fright or concern on his face, so I knew he wasn't trying to pull my leg." Unquote. Little did that mother know that her family was not alone with pterosaur sightings in Shropshire. Why was this young man nervous while I interviewed him on a remote tropical island of Papua New Guinea in 2004? Was he just nervous because an American was interviewing him, or was it remembering the Ropen? About 10 years earlier, in the 1990s, he was one of 7 boys who hiked up to the crater lake they call Pung. Perhaps they ran along the shore, yelling, having fun. That's when a huge Ropen flew over the surface of the lake. What happened then? Came back home. Okay. Now let's go back to 1944. During World War II, after the Japanese had left the area around Finchhaven, New Guinea. Dwayne Hodgkinson and his army buddy were in a jungle clearing in the middle of the day when something huge ran across the far side of the clearing, flapping its wings to get airborne. Hodgkinson at first assumed it was a bird, but then he saw that the flying creature was much too big, and it had a horn-like head crest. In a videotaped interview in 2005, Hodgkinson gave Garth Guessman an estimate for the length of the tail. Quote, "at least 10 or 15 feet long," unquote.
brother and my stepbrother, we went out to go try to find anything.
And there's three of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was you and your brother Dallin, and then there was your
My stepbrother.
Stepbrother is Jonathan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who saw the creature first?
I did.
Who saw the flying creature first?
My brother.
Dallin? Okay.
We're all just looking up in the sky and kind of looking around. Just the animals that live next door. There's a little farm next door. They started making all these weird noises and everything like that. And it flies over. I see it, and I was like, guys, look at over there. And they didn't like look, I guess, in time.
Like freaking out, looking at the sky. It's just like, what is that up there? What is it? It's like a giant bird or something.
It's like this bird kind of thing flying, like soaring though. Like it wasn't like flapping.
He started freaking out too, and I was like, they planned this. I knew they planned this. So I just took my time. I wasn't going to rush down if they were playing a joke on me.
Soaring, and it was
One thing.
fairly close.
So,
We heard the dogs and the animals, all the pigs and the horses and stuff or whatever, just go crazy. Started making lots of noise, and it flew above me for a few seconds and just kind of glided. It's going to be about 20 feet, maybe 15. That was probably my best guess on there.
15 or 20 feet in terms of
Wingspan.
Okay. This is no joke. Where did this sketch come from? It was drawn by an eyewitness. About 3 years before this photo was taken, this little girl, Patty Carson, saw the flying creature in eastern Cuba in about the year 1965. I'm Jonathan Whitcomb. Yesterday, March 13th, 2019, I learned that my friend Patty Carson had passed away. She was never on a radio or television talk show, to my knowledge. Comparatively few people knew about her shocking encounter with what appears to have been a non-extinct long-tailed pterosaur at Guantanamo Bay. Now, look at what happened 6 years later in 1971. Another sighting of a strange flying creature at Guantanamo Bay. A U.S. Marine was taking a break one day when he saw two of them. Please consider his own words. Quote, very close in range from where I was standing so that I had a perfectly clear view of them. Within minutes of his sighting, he drew this. Quote, "They had a long tail trailing behind with a tuft of hair at the end. The wingspan roughly 10 feet, could have been 8 feet or 12 feet. I've interviewed Eskin by phone several times over a period of years. He's a real person and stands by his testimony of what he saw in 1971. He also said, "There is no mistaking what I saw. It was middle of the day during our free time, a work day. No booze, no drugs, bright sun, and full visibility." I've spoken with both of these eyewitnesses many times, and both of them convinced me that they were telling the truth. I submit these two sketches as evidence in cryptozoology for the existence of these flying creatures that have been seen by many other eyewitnesses in North America and in other areas of the world. Let's now compare these two drawings with open-mindedness. I see a difference in the depiction of the head crest. Look at it this way. What artist has a perfect memory? Why should two sketches be identical? These are not two photos of the same animal, but sketches from memory, maybe not even the same animal. I measured the distance from the center of the eye to the end of the head crest and to the end of the beak or mouth. In Eskin Kun's sketch, the eye is a bit closer to the end of the beak. In Patty's sketch, the center of the eye is about halfway between the end of the head crest and the end of the beak. I submit that this slight difference is well within the range of error that we can expect from two gifted artists who have depicted from memory what they remembered of a real encounter with a real animal. The sketch drawn by Patty Carson shows many small teeth. Why does the sketch by Eskin Kun show no teeth? The two flying creatures seen in 1971 were flying apparently with their mouths closed. Most of Patty's observation of the apparent pterosaur in 1965 was in those seconds while it was standing in tall grass. In addition, Patty seems to have been closer to the animal than Mr. Kun was to the two that he saw flying. In the earlier sighting, after the creature flew away, Patty ran home to tell her family that she had seen a dinosaur. Consider her own words on what then happened. "They all pooh-poohed me and started to tell me it was a pelican or frigate bird. No way! It was as tall as a man when it stood up on his haunches. It was close. It froze for a few seconds, so I got a good look." When we were kids, we lived in Arlington. Dad worked in the Pentagon, and we would often go to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, and when I saw it, I knew exactly that it was a pterodactyl, and even named it as such to my family. They didn't believe me. I know what I saw. I know exactly what I saw. In the year 2003, I was an independent forensic videographer, working for attorney firms, mostly in Southern California. A man from Texas sent me videos he had recorded of natives in Papua New Guinea who had seen large flying creatures. Those men and women may have seen something like a pterosaur, apparently, in those tropical islands of the southwest Pacific. Papua New Guinea has some of the most remote and unexplored jungles in the world. In 2003, I assumed that this would be a likely place for pterosaurs to live, if they have survived anywhere on the earth. In other words, maybe in a remote jungle, but no other place in the world. Keep in mind that this was long before I knew about the sightings in Cuba by Patty Carson and Eskin Kun. By early in 2004, I had heard about 3 Americans who wanted to search for living pterosaurs in Papua New Guinea. They were planning for an expedition in 2004, and I soon determined that I wanted to be a member of the team. To make this a brief explanation, I did go on an expedition in Papua New Guinea later in 2004, but I was the lone American. 2 of the others, David Wetzel and Garth Guessman, went on a separate expedition a few weeks after I had explored part of Umboy Island. Yet those 2 expeditions on Umboy Island were not such a fool's errand as people in Western countries would suppose. We were not depending only on what a few natives had said about the Ropen of Umboy, also called Duus by other natives. Living Pterosaurs Part 2. I'm Jonathan Whitcomb. Over the last 17 years, I've received hundreds of reports from around the world, directly from the eyewitnesses themselves, accounts of non-extinct pterodactyls. In this video, we'll look at more recent sightings in North America. Then you'll get the answer to this question: why should people believe that these recent sightings were of living pterosaurs? To prepare for that answer, consider this. There's practically no controversy about these flying creatures living in the past. We have fossils of them. But since about the time that Benjamin Franklin died, the idea that all pterosaurs are extinct, that has been taken for granted. Indeed, for about a century now, their extinction has been preached as if it were gospel truth. Now consider some recent sightings of apparent modern pterosaurs in North America. In April of 2020, Candace sent me an email about her sighting, which was 3 weeks earlier in Shelbyville, Kentucky. I now quote some of what Candace told me. We were driving through a lot of heavily wooded area and some fields. I saw a very large shadow go over us, much bigger than the car we were in. I thought maybe a crop dusting plane went over us, but when I looked out my window, what I saw was no plane. Dark in color, its wings reminded me of a bat, and it had a tail with a diamond shape at the end. Its head was very long and narrow, like a beak of a crane. I watched it fly behind us, then perch atop a very large tree." Unquote. She then told me more about the flying creature. Quote, "It was so big. It had no feathers or hair. I know what I saw was a pterodactyl of some kind. Everyone I've tried to tell has called me crazy or laughed at me, including the driver I was with. He claims I saw a hawk, but I know what I saw." Unquote.
Yeah, it was July of 2018. I just got done going to Walmart, and as soon as I got back into my car, and as soon as I took a right and started going down the road, I looked up and I saw a large flying creature. Its wings were not flapping like a bird's would. It was rolling. I noticed it was different than anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't just a regular up and down, it was a rolling motion. I decided to keep an eye on it, and I was so curious as to what it was. So I was going the same direction it was. And then when it went to dive down by the tree line, I noticed that there was a long tail with a bulb at the end of it, and I kept double checking to make sure, and I'm like, that has to be a tail.
For 15 years, I've received reports of apparent pterosaurs in the United States, and I'm not talking about rumors or anecdotes, but direct reports from the eyewitnesses themselves. Why have Americans been contacting me about their encounters with strange flying creatures that appear to have no feathers? Since the year 2003, I've published many web pages and blog posts about apparent non-extinct pterosaurs. I've also written several non-fiction books on these nocturnal animals, these apparent pterosaurs that are seen worldwide. I also wrote a scientific paper in a peer-reviewed journal of science. When an eyewitness does an online search, he or she can find one of my publications and come to know that I take these reports seriously. That person may then send me an email telling me about a sighting. Now we look at what flew by a lady and her daughter in Columbus, Ohio early in 2014 at about 7 a.m. She sent me an email in July of 2014. The huge size of the flying creature and the lady's description of the teeth in its mouth make it highly unlikely to have been a misidentified bird. I believe that this creature was at least closely related to these two seen at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba in 1971. The lady whose sighting was in Ohio in 2014 told me the teeth were all even. Top and bottom teeth have same description. Even if it was not the same species as the ones seen in Cuba, the ones seen in Columbus, Ohio, clearly had teeth. Birds do not have teeth. The lady also told me the flying creature had leathery skin and that it had 3 fingers on each triangle-shaped wing. Could it have been a large bat that was not native to Ohio? It would have been quite a large bat indeed, for the lady described its wingspan in terms of the width of Westerville Road.